And then cue your arrival.
We have a 2-minute warning to the press briefing, 2-minute warning to the press briefing.
Yeah, how are you? Jackie. Nice to meet you.
I've actually
I also hear that actually and I actually moved twin of it. There's like one building that's different, and then there's like a north building. Thank you so much. And like all the venues. I mean, it's just super. And then there's like really high end. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the last year they because it wasn't like a.
Got a problem with
I thought I'd keep that to myself because it's big. Well, happy that I was conscious. Sorry, the medical light, that sounds expensive.
they might have taken a long time. Yeah.
well, that's a matter of he's leading the way for you.
Hello, Jen. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy Pride. Celebrating here today. Okay, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the week ahead. On Monday, the President will welcome Israeli President Rivlin to the White House. President Rivlin's visit will highlight the enduring partnership between the United States and Israel and the deep ties between our governments and our people. As President Rivlin approaches the end of his term, the visit will honor the dedication he has shown to strengthening the friendship between the two countries over the course of many years. On Tuesday, the President will travel to Southwest Wisconsin with Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack to talk about growing agriculture and rural economies. On Wednesday, he will convene cabinet officials, governors from Western states, and private sector partners to discuss the devastating intersection of drought, heat, and wildfires in the western United States, and strengthening prevention, preparedness, and response efforts for this wildfire season, which is already outpacing last season outpacing last season alone. Sorry, the 2020 wildfire season alone burned over 10 million acres across the United States, resulting in the loss of dozens of lives and tens of billions of dollars in economic damage. This meeting will focus on how the federal government can most effectively protect public safety and deliver assistance to our people in times of urgent need. And on Friday, the president will also deliver remarks on the June jobs report. Next week, even while all of this is going on, a busy week, the president will also continue to work and engage closely with members of Congress about moving his agenda forward, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure agreement just announced yesterday or the budget reconciliation process that's also moving forward. And he will continue to on his work to protect the sacred right to vote. You'll hear from him next week on that. We're still finalizing the details, and he's been engaged in that work through his career, so you'll hear more from him on that next week. I'd also note, so I don't forget, today is Jerome's last day in the White House briefing room as a White House correspondent, so thank you to your service to the public over the last several years. All right, why don't we kick it off, Darlene?
Thank you, Jen. Is the infrastructure agreement already stuck in a pothole?
You worked hard on that.
No, I didn't.
I like it. Absolutely not, in our view. The president is continuing to, as he said yesterday, there's work ahead. There's no question about that. But yesterday was a significant moment when you saw Democrats and Republicans and the President of the United States stand outside together and say, we've come to agreement to work toward passing a historic investment in infrastructure, one that would have, I just have this handy chart up here, I thought someone might ask about this, would have key components that would help communities across the country. And I talked with him about this morning, what he was most excited about, what he's going to continue, what his message is going to be as he continues to advocate for this bill moving forward. One is the significant economic impact. It's going to help create millions of good-paying union jobs. It will also have a huge impact on low-income communities, on communities of color. It will eliminate lead pipes to stop kids from drinking poison water. Flint, Michigan should not be so far away that we don't remember the impact on that community. Part of this package will help prevent that from ever happening again. It includes the single largest investment in environmental remediation in history. What does that mean? A lot of people at home don't know what that means, so I'm going to explain it. And it's 100% of what he asked for. It means cleaning up pollution in communities that have disproportionately borne the brunt of environmental pollution. It also means capping wells where big oil companies left wells uncapped with methane pouring out. It means putting people back to work to do the work we need to do to help create a clean energy economy for the long term. And it has the largest investment in public transit in our nation's history. We know this will also have an enormous impact on low-income communities, many communities of color. I'll also note there are huge components of this package that will help address the climate crisis. One is the first time we've ever invested, in a network of EV charging stations across the country. So electric vehicles, I don't currently own one, maybe I will in the future, who knows? It will make it easier. There will be more charging stations so people can use them across the country. It will have the largest investment in history in a clean energy transmission grid, something that will also help us take a huge step forward. And this bill also will help us, and this is a piece he talked about yesterday, but he's particularly excited about us, make us more competitive in the world. And a specific example there is making sure we are building our battery industry here in the United States to compete globally. So that's the case he's making. He's going to continue to make. There's no question there's work ahead, and he's ready to roll up his sleeves and work like hell to get it done.
But we're hearing from the Hill from a lot of senators that unhappiness over the president's decision to want to do both these packages at the same time, the pairing, moving them in tandem. When senators agreed to this deal, was the White House upfront with them that this was the way the president wanted to proceed?
Well, first, you all have heard the president say multiple times publicly that he was going to move these bills forward, wanted to move them forward in parallel paths. And that's exactly what's happening. That hasn't been a secret. He hasn't said it quietly. He hasn't even whispered it. He said it very much out loud to all of you, as we have said many times from here. I will say that the president's view is that the public, the American people, elected him to not lead on process, but to get things done. The House and Senate are going to determine, the leaders in the House and Senate are going to determine the sequencing, the timeline, and he looks forward to signing both pieces of legislation.
One other quick one.
Yeah.
What is the plan for, will we get a statement from the president after Derek Chauvin is sentenced? Do you expect the president will call George Floyd's family, be in touch with them after the sentence is
It's a great
announced?
question, Darlene. I don't have any I don't have anything to preview for you. I guess I should say at this point we'll wait for the sentencing to come out. As you know, he has a close personal connection with the Floyd family, and certainly I know they and we are all watching this closely. Go ahead.
Does the president have any plans to visit Surfside to see the devastation for himself?
Well, I would say first that any decision along those lines would be done in coordination and cooperation with local authorities. As you know, and you all have been covering this closely, right now we're in a rescue and recovery phase of this, and there have been frequent updates from local authorities on the ground. So I don't have any trip to preview or predict for you at this point in time.
How did the vice president choose El Paso as the location for her first trip to the border as vice president?
It's a great question. I was interested in that as well, so we looked into it. I would say that El Paso has an interesting history, as you may know, because it was the place where the former president it was a base place of where he put in place some of his immigration policies that we felt were so problematic. And so it's a place that has a little bit of historical connection in that regard, and it's an opportunity to draw a bit of a contrast with what we're trying to accomplish.
Can you give us any details about the 3 staffers in the vice president's office who are leaving, and what should we take from the fact that you have several key staffers who are leaving this early in the administration?
I just don't have any more details on the circumstances of their departure. As you may know, these are sometimes high-stress jobs, tiring jobs, exhausting jobs, but I don't have anything more specific on their decisions. Go ahead.
Following up on Surfside, if I can, very quickly. Obviously, no details about whether he plans to travel there. Has the president now spoken to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis about the circumstances?
We're working to set up a call between the president and the governor that should be happening this afternoon, and we'll give you all a readout of that when it happens.
We'll wait for that readout when it happens. The president yesterday spoke about voting rights and what he would be doing. He said, quote, "I'll be going around the country making the case." So he announced it. What specifically is he doing? Where is he going? And what is that going to look like?
Stay tuned. I don't have any specific visits to announce for you yet, but this is going to be a fight of his presidency. He believes that voting is a fundamental right for the American people. He's going to use every lever at his disposal to advocate for that. You'll hear more from him next week as well.
The DOJ announcement today that they would be filing this lawsuit against Georgia, given what's going on with their election law there. Did the White House play a role in that? Did the president consult anybody? Does he have any thought on it?
We did not. That was an announcement they made on their own, but it certainly is consistent with the president's commitment to the administration and the guidance he's given publicly and directly to use every lever at our disposal to ensure we are protecting the fundamental right to vote across the country. Go ahead.
So on the timing of when the president's going to get out and advocate for voting rights, I mean, how soon can we see this? We were hearing everyone from the Department of Justice to activists saying that this is a really urgent issue. So how soon can we expect this?
Well, the president's going to speak to all of you and to the public next week about his continuing commitment to voting rights, expanding access to voting rights, something that he's worked on for decades through his public career. And I expect he'll have more to say then.
And if you could just follow up and maybe clarify when the president's talking about doing these 2 pieces of legislation in tandem. Is he going to wait for both of them to land on his desk? What exactly is the timeline here? How does this play out?
Well, again, he believes the American people elected him to lead on getting results, to put out bold ideas to the public. That's exactly what he's done. And we're going to leave it to leaders in Congress to determine the sequencing and the timeline for those pieces moving forward. But he's going to use every lever at his disposal. He's going to be involved. He's going to roll up his sleeves. He's going to work like hell to get both of these pieces of legislation done.
What does that really look like? Because he says that if one doesn't come to him, he's not going to sign the other. So is he going to wait for both of them to land on his desk before signing the bipartisan package, waiting for the reconciliation package to come through?
He fully expects, hopes, plans to sign both into law, and he will leave it to leaders in Congress to determine the timeline and the sequencing. Go ahead.
So just to follow up both on that and Darlene's question, the issue Republicans seem to be having is on that specific issue. I won't sign it. if the other one isn't on my desk. I think that's what has them frazzled, perhaps would be the word right now, an eloquent one. So digging in on that, if leadership decides to send you the bipartisan bill, but the reconciliation bill is not done yet, the president said yesterday, I won't sign it, and that is the White House position on it?
Well, let me just take a step back here, because I think the American people are quite focused on how we're getting work done on their behalf, less focused on the mechanics of the process. Now, it is up to Republicans, many of whom are the ones who have conveyed that, I think, if I'm accurate here, to decide if they are going to vote against a historic investment in infrastructure that's going to rebuild roads and railways and bridges in their communities simply because they don't like the mechanics of the process. That's a pretty absurd argument for them to make. Good luck on the political front on that argument. So the president's going to continue to advocate, educate, convey to everyone directly why this needs to move forward. And he plans to stand exactly by the commitment he made yesterday to them, and he expects they'll do the same.
And just two more quick ones. You guys just released a readout with a call with Senator Sinema.
Yeah.
As one of the lead negotiators. In that readout, the president was reiterating pretty much all of the things he said when he was standing with the senators. Was there a need for the president to reassure Senator Sinema, or was that just a normal scheduled call?
I think it's just a reflection of the president's commitment to stay very engaged. Yesterday was not the end. I know none of you thought that, but just to be clear, there's work ahead. Senator Sinema was an important leader and partner on this effort to get this bipartisan bill passed. He also reiterated in that call his desire and his commitment and interest in getting a reconciliation bill passed that has a lot of his key priorities, whether it's extending the child tax credit, making universal pre-K a reality, or community college a reality for kids across the country. So it's ongoing engagement. He's looking forward to signing both bills into law. Go ahead.
Are Republicans expected to be so enamored with the idea of sending perhaps billions of dollars into the hinterland that they're going to be willing, you need 5 more Republicans obviously, that they're going to be willing to accept this 2-track approach and sort of look the other way when the express train comes through on the reconciliation idea? Are they, you're sounding as though you expect at least 5 more Republicans to be so enamored with the idea of sending out these billions of dollars to the constituencies, if you will.
Sure. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. This bill would, again, be a historic investment in our nation's infrastructure, the largest investment in public transit in history, the largest since the founding of Amtrak. And as I've noted, it would expand broadband access. That's not exactly a partisan issue. It would rebuild roads and railways and bridges in people's communities, including Republicans. So, yes, we fully expect the American people support this. We fully expect and hope we'll have the votes to get it forward. At least 5. Well, 5 stood there yesterday and announced their support for it. And it is now the job of the Democratic caucus and the Republican caucus to go back and make the case to their other colleagues. Exactly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. House Budget Committee Chairman John Yarmouth said he doesn't think it's realistic to fully pay for this broader reconciliation package that contains some of the president's other domestic priorities that you just laid out. Senator Manchin also said he doesn't think the country can take on that much more debt. So does the White House still believe that both the infrastructure compromise and this other reconciliation package need to be fully paid for?
The president's proposed a number of ways to pay for these packages. Obviously, there was agreement already on the pay-fors for the infrastructure bipartisan deal, which was agreed to by the 5 Democrats and the 5 Republicans who stood outside with the president just yesterday. And the president also believes that raising the corporate rate back to where it was the first year of the George W. Bush administration, asking individuals, the top 1% of Americans, to pay more, to pay for these historic investments, to pay for an extension of the child tax credit, to make sure kids have access to universal pre-K, is something that we should do because it's the right policy. It will also, it's also going to help move our country forward.
One quick question on Afghanistan. Can the president declare a true end to the war if the U.S. is planning to keep 650 troops in the country to provide diplomatic security, as well as several hundred additional troops to maintain security at the Kabul airport?
Well, again, I would say the president was clear from the beginning that we anticipated and planned to have a diplomatic presence on the ground, and so he's doing exactly that.
Can I follow up on that, Jen?
Sure.
On Afghanistan, and then I have a follow-up on something else, but on Afghanistan, if we're keeping people there, what's the contingency if, in fact, the Taliban takes over the country? Do you have a contingency? Does the administration have a contingency for that
In what regard?
Well, what will
For
you
the
do?
safety of our
I
men and
understand
women
the
serving
safety,
in
but-
Kabul, or
I understand the safety of our people, but what about the safety of the country? We've been there for X amount of years. Are we going to reinvest more people if that's the case? Will there be boots on the ground? What exactly is this administration looking at if that country falls to the Taliban?
well, here's I think what's important to note, Brian. When the president made this announcement, he was very clear that if we did not pull our troops, withdraw our troops from Afghanistan, something that he has long talked about having an interest and a desire to do, the Taliban would have been shooting at U.S. troops again on May 1st. That's a decision he had to make as president. So the withdrawal deadline negotiated, because of the withdrawal deadline negotiated, I should say, by the prior administration. So his fundamental belief is that after 20 years, it's time to bring our troops home. We're doing that in a timely and orderly fashion, led by the Department of Defense. And we had to make sure we were taking steps. If we had left our troops there, they would be in harm's way. That was a step we had to take.
And so if the Taliban takes over, what would we do?
Well, again, I'm not going to get ahead of or anticipate. We have a range of capacities, including over-the-horizon capacities and capabilities that we will maintain in place. The president announced that at the beginning of his announcement.
Follow-up, the other question is this administration prepared for? We've heard rumblings from the former president and his supporters about August and the inevitability of him being reinstated. Is this administration prepared to meet the challenge if, in fact, they press that issue in August? I mean, we've already seen an insurrection. What would this administration's actions be if that is pressed in August?
The president is prepared to continue to govern and lead the United States of America, and of course, should there be an elevation and escalation, that is something we would certainly monitor and track as well. Go ahead, Jackie.
On reconciliation, before the president made this statement yesterday, had there been any understanding between the president and the GOP senators who were negotiating that these two deals would come in tandem? Had the Republican senators expressed an understanding to the president that that would happen?
Well, Jackie, I think the point I was trying to make earlier is that it's something the president stated publicly many times, and certainly he was consistent with that case made privately, as were our negotiating team, that he anticipated these initiatives would move forward on a dual track. And I would also note that when we say budget reconciliation, and just to make it like in human speak, what we're talking about here is a budget process that includes the American Families Plan, which is the president's idea he proposed. I don't think anyone expects that he was going to walk away from his own proposals.
And the Republicans had expressed an level of understanding that would happen.
I'm not going to I'll let them speak for themselves, but again, the president said this, as we did multiple times publicly.
And then on reconciliation, what are the red lines and the must-haves, and is the same team working with Congress, Ricchetti, Terrell, Deese, about the next steps in the reconciliation?
Well, earlier this week, today's Friday, I think it was Wednesday, we did have a number of those individuals you mentioned, as well as Susan Rice was a part of the team, and there may have been one or two other people who went up to the Hill to talk about the budget reconciliation process. We're obviously at the early stages of that. There's a lot to discuss and negotiate, including among Democrats, so we'll let that proceed in the coming weeks.
And then with the DOJ suing Georgia, is this the beginning of more lawsuits against similar efforts in other states? Has the White House expressed any concern areas as they take on voting rights and initiatives like that?
I'll let the Attorney General and the Department of Justice speak to that and what their plans are. They probably won't preview them, I would expect. But I think it's just a reflection of the fact that the president has conveyed his priority is using every lever at his disposal to protect the fundamental right of people in this country to vote.
What's your timeline for these two pieces of legislation?
I don't have a new timeline to predict for you here, Steve. Again, Speaker Pelosi has been doing this a while. I don't know that there's anyone better, and we're going to work with her, Leader Schumer, and others to make sure we get these bills signed into law.
On the Afghanistan meeting, is the president going to talk about a negotiated political settlement? Is that still possible in Afghanistan?
A political path forward is certainly one that we continue to support. We have a negotiator, as you well know, who is monitoring and closely engaged in that process, and so that is certainly ongoing and will be a part of the agenda. Go ahead.
Thank you. On Afghanistan, in terms of SIV applicants, the president said yesterday this would be a topic in the meeting today. Can you provide clarity on what neutral locations these applicants will be moved towards, and then also will that withdrawal include those who have already fled Afghanistan because of a fear of retaliation to places like Jordan or Egypt?
Yeah, so let me give you information on where we are, and it's unfortunately not going to answer every single question. Some of this we're not going to be able to outline for security reasons, but we have identified a group of SIV applicants, special immigrant visa applicants, who have served as interpreters and translators, as well as other at-risk categories who have assisted us. They will be relocated to a location outside of Afghanistan before we complete our military drawdown by September. In order to complete the visa application process. So they will do it from another location. The additional details of that, I'm just not going to be able to speak to from here.
Did you say a number, though, on
I don't have a number to outline for you, and it's unlikely we will, because we are going to, those are the categories that we are prioritizing. I'd also note that these are individuals who are already in the SIV pipeline, and so we'd undertake any relocation in full compliance with U.S. law.
And just a follow-up. I know I've asked about this a good amount, but from my colleagues as well. We reported yesterday that the administration would lift Title 42 in a phased approach this summer. Does this summer look likely? And here's a new addition to that question. What will be the administration's plan once that policy is lifted? Will it be centered on deterrence? Will it be prioritizing restoring the asylum system?
Well, first I would say on the second part that of course we want to restore the asylum system and we want to make it more operational. We want to